Asher King's day had started like any other, until the sky above him split apart like shattered glass. One moment he was a 27-year-old corporate analyst pulling another late night at the office. The next, a blinding light engulfed him, tearing his consciousness from reality. When he woke up, he was lying on a bed draped in silk sheets, the scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. The ornate chandelier above him glimmered like a constellation, and the marble floor reflected his bewildered expression. It took only a few minutes for him to realize something was terribly wrong. His own reflection in the gilded mirror was not the tired face he knew. Instead, a sharp-jawed, impeccably groomed young man with emerald green eyes and a careless elegance of old money stared back at him. The smartphone on the bedside table displayed a different name, Asher King, the same as his, but not the same person. A calm, mechanical voice suddenly echoed in his mind. "Welcome, host number 2190. You have been successfully integrated into the narrative world of Love and Ashes. Your assigned role, the wealthy heir, Asher King. Primary mission, save the tragic supporting female character, Isabella Vance." Asher almost laughed at the absurdity, until the voice continued. "Isabella Vance, formerly the cherished daughter of the Vance fortune. Her family has fallen into bankruptcy. Her engagement to Caleb Reed, the male protagonist, has been annulled. She is destined to spiral into despair. Your intervention will alter her fate." The voice's monotone delivery sent a chill down Asher's spine. He remembered this novel. He had once read it out of boredom on a long business flight. Isabella had been the bittersweet figure of the story, a woman who lost everything: wealth, love, and dignity. In the original plot, the wealthy heir Asher King had stepped in as her last lifeline. He had given her a place to stay, protected her from scandals, and secretly financed her comeback. But the pages of the story had painted a cruel reality: Isabella had never appreciated him. Her heart belonged entirely to Caleb Reed, the celebrated male lead who saw her downfall as nothing more than a passing inconvenience. Whenever Asher extended a hand to pull her back from the edge, she mistook his sincerity for manipulation. She despised him for being her reminder of dependence, for standing between her and Caleb. The tragic arc had been unforgettable. Asher King, the character whose name he now bore, eventually gave his life to save Isabella during a business-related incident. Only after his death did Isabella realize he had truly loved her all along. The novel's final chapters described her lifelong regret, the way she visited his grave every year, speaking to the tombstone as if he could still hear her. Now that story's doomed savior was him. Asher sank into the leather armchair by the window, watching the city skyline glitter beneath the night sky. He wasn't a saint. He had no desire to throw himself into another person's tragedy, especially one who was destined to scorn him. "Save Isabella Vance," he muttered with a bitter smile. That didn't end well for the last Asher King. Why would I repeat his mistake? The system, however, was relentless. Mission failure will result in the host's erasure from this world. Completion guarantees survival and substantial narrative rewards. That was when he felt the weight of his predicament. He was not merely inhabiting a fictional character's body, his existence now hinged on the story's outcome. Yet, even with that knowledge, his instincts screamed against sacrificing himself for someone who would never value his efforts. He stood, shoulders squared, gazing at his reflection once more. The man in the mirror looked like every woman's dream: wealthy, powerful, untouchable. But beneath that polished exterior was a reluctant intruder in a scripted tragedy. "Asher King, he whispered to the reflection. "If I'm going to live your life, I'll do it my way. No more dying for ungrateful people." The city lights flickered like distant stars as he made a silent vow: he would not be another casualty of the novel's twisted fate. Whether the system liked it or not, he planned to rewrite the story, starting with the mission he had no intention of fulfilling. For the next few days, Asher explored his new reality like a tourist with a black card budget. The penthouse that stretched across the top 3 floors of King Tower was no longer a stranger's home but his personal playground. Each morning he woke to the scent of roasted coffee delivered by the staff, marble floors gleaming beneath his bare feet, and a skyline painted in sunrise gold. The system's voice intruded again and again like an unwelcome alarm clock. Host, Isabella Vance has just been evicted from her family estate. Her emotional value is plummeting. Intervention is advised. Asher didn't even glance up from the glossy magazine he was flipping through. Not my problem, he muttered, stretching out on the velvet sofa. Refusal detected. Mission success rate decreases to 42%. Re-engagement recommended. He smirked at the ceiling. You think threatening me with percentages will work? Listen, I've read the novel. I know exactly how this ends. I die, she cries at my funeral, then regrets it for the rest of her life. I'd rather live. The system fell silent for a beat, then tried again with its usual monotone urgency. Deviation from the narrative will destabilize the world. Erasure protocol may be initiated. Go ahead, Asher shot back, tossing the magazine aside. Erase me. I dare you. Let's see which one of us blinks first. He didn't know whether it was his arrogance or sheer recklessness that made the system hesitate. Whatever the reason, the mechanical voice faded, leaving him in blissful quiet. That evening, instead of driving to the address where Isabella was reportedly staying, a rundown motel on the outskirts, he visited the most exclusive boutique in the city. The staff greeted him with bows, presenting the newest limited edition suits and watches. Asher tried on a tailored charcoal suit, admired the way it fit his frame, and bought it without glancing at the price tag. If the world wanted him to be a tragic savior, he was determined to be a pampered villain instead. In the days that followed, he signed a membership at the most luxurious country club, hosted a private yacht party for the city's elite heirs, and spent his nights in neon-lit clubs where music drowned out the whispers of fate. The tabloids adored him. The king heir returns, a billionaire's lavish nights. Meanwhile, Isabella's plight worsened. News sites reported that the Vance estate had been auctioned off to pay debts. A photo of her leaving a courthouse, shoulders hunched beneath the flash of cameras, appeared on the morning paper Asher skimmed over breakfast. He stared at the image for a long second, expression unreadable, then folded the paper neatly and reached for his coffee. Host, the system interrupted again, almost pleading this time, she has reached her lowest point. The original Asher would have stepped in here. He leaned back in his chair, voice cool and detached. That's the difference. I'm not the original Asher. A quiet defiance burned behind his eyes. He wasn't cruel, he simply refused to be the martyr of someone else's tragedy. The city outside the window sparkled with opportunity, and for the first time in years, fictional or real, he felt in control of his own life. Somewhere deep in the system's core, warning alarms must have been flashing, but to Asher, the silence that followed was the sweetest victory. The first time Asher saw Isabella again was not in some pitiful back alley or a charity line, as the system's mission log had implied. She appeared at the marble lobby of King Tower like she still belonged there, shoulders squared, chin tilted in the same imperious angle she had once carried as the darling of high society. For a moment, Asher watched from the balcony above the lobby, leaning against the sleek glass railing with his usual air of detached amusement. She hadn't changed much. The tailored cream-colored coat she wore had seen better days, and the designer logo on her handbag was barely visible under the wear and tear, but Isabella Vance still exuded the pride of a woman who thought the world owed her everything. When she finally noticed him descending the curved staircase, her expression wavered, just for a heartbeat, before her features hardened again. Asher, she greeted coolly, as if they hadn't spent 6 awkward months under the same roof. Asher King, he corrected, with a thin smile. We were never on a first-name basis, remember? Her lips pressed together. Once upon a time, at least in the original story, she had moved into his penthouse after her family's downfall. He had offered her sanctuary, but she had treated it as an obligation on his part, often reminding him that her heart belonged to Caleb Reed. Now, she stepped forward, tone brisk and businesslike. I just need a place to stay until things settle. You know my circumstances. The penthouse has plenty of space, I'll keep out of your way. The audacity of her words nearly made Asher laugh. You mean my penthouse, the one you used to treat like your personal hotel suite? You want back in? Her nostrils flared, but she held his gaze. I thought you were better than this. You used to help me. True, he conceded, descending the last step until they were face to face. But the Asher you remember had a tragic hero complex. I'm fresh out of that. Maria, the longtime housekeeper who had served the King family for decades, appeared at that moment. Her wrinkled face softened with pity as she looked at Isabella. Young master, perhaps we can let her stay for a few nights. No, Asher's voice cut like steel. Maria, you seem to have forgotten who pays your salary. If you can't follow my decisions, you can pack your things along with her. The housekeeper gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. Isabella's eyes blazed with anger. You would fire her for me? She's been loyal to your family for years. She was loyal to my family, he corrected calmly. Now she's siding with a guest who overstayed her welcome. The words landed like a slap. Maria, pale and trembling, bowed her head and quietly retreated. Isabella's fists clenched at her sides. You're heartless. No, Asher said, voice cool but firm, just done being someone else's safety net. For a brief, charged silence, the only sound in the lobby was the distant hum of the city outside. The breaking point came a week later. Asher returned home late from a business dinner to find 2 pairs of shoes at the entrance. One unmistakably belonged to a man. Suspicion prickled at him as he strode into the living room. There they were, Isabella seated stiffly on the couch, and beside her, Caleb Reed, the golden boy of the novel, the man she had always loved. Caleb rose at once, his expression a mixture of awkwardness and disdain. King. We were just talking. I came to see how Isabella's holding up. Asher's jaw tightened. He had tolerated a lot in his previous life, mockery, betrayal, heartbreak, but he wasn't about to watch another man sit comfortably in his own home like he owned the place. Talking? Asher's tone was deceptively mild as he stepped closer. Funny. I don't recall inviting you into my living room. Isabella jumped to her feet. Don't be unreasonable, Asher. Caleb's here as my guest. Your guest, Asher repeated, a humorless chuckle escaping him. Last I checked, you don't live here. Neither of you do. Caleb bristled. You're overreacting. No, Asher said, his voice dropping an octave, steady and cutting. I'm drawing a boundary. Something you two clearly don't understand. He turned to Isabella, eyes narrowing. You've spent 6 months here rent-free. I covered your bills, your clothes, even the fancy shoes you're wearing right now. If you insist on treating my home like a charity shelter and me like a fool, then I suggest you repay every cent before walking back through that door. Her face flushed crimson, a mix of humiliation and fury. You can't be serious. I am. His gaze was unwavering. You'll receive an invoice for the rent, utilities, and the loan I gave you. I expect full repayment. As for now, get out. Both of you. Caleb's mouth opened as if to protest, but one look at Asher's expression convinced him otherwise. He placed a protective hand on Isabella's shoulder and guided her toward the door. As the elevator doors closed on them, Asher exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. For the first time since waking up in this world, he felt a strange satisfaction, an act of rebellion against the script that had once demanded his sacrifice. High above the glittering city lights, the penthouse felt quieter, emptier, yet far freer without their presence. The annual grand charity auction was the kind of event where the city's elite paraded their wealth under the soft glow of chandeliers. Photographers lined the crimson carpet, their flashes capturing every designer gown and million-dollar smile. Asher arrived late, stepping out of a sleek black limousine in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo that turned more than a few heads. He didn't come for charity. He came for the prime lot of the evening, a coveted stretch of waterfront property valued at $500 million. In the novel's original timeline, the original Asher King had purchased that land and gifted it to Isabella to help her rebuild her empire. Tonight, that script was about to be rewritten. As he entered the grand hall, murmurs trailed behind him. The whispers grew louder when Isabella appeared minutes later, dressed in an elegant but slightly outdated evening gown. Caleb Reed, polished and confident as ever, escorted her. To the watching crowd, they were still the perfect couple, beauty and ambition hand in hand. The bidding war for the waterfront property began with a flurry of raised paddles. Prices skyrocketed until only two bidders remained, a middle-aged construction magnate and Asher King. $380 million, the magnate called. Asher lazily raised his paddle. $400. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. Isabella, seated beside Caleb, tensed but said nothing as the magnate raised again. $450. $500, Asher countered without hesitation. His voice was calm, almost bored. The auctioneer's gavel came down. Sold. To Mr. Asher King for $500 million. Polite applause followed, but the tension in the room was palpable. Asher leaned back in his chair, utterly composed, while Isabella's expression darkened. When the auction concluded, she approached him near the champagne bar, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Caleb followed, visibly uneasy. "You bought that land," Isabella began, her tone strained but authoritative. "That property was supposed to be mine. You promised me that years ago." Asher set down his glass with deliberate slowness. "Correction, the original Asher promised you that. I don't recall signing any contract." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me. You owe me that land. If you still have a shred of decency, you'll hand it over, and apologize to both of us for the way you treated us." The crowd nearby began to hush, sensing the brewing storm. Caleb shifted uncomfortably, as though he wished to intervene but lacked the courage. Asher's laugh was low and unkind. "Apologize? For what? Refusing to bankroll your new hobby after you spent 6 months treating me like a doormat?" Gasps fluttered through the onlookers. Isabella's cheeks flamed, but she pressed on, her pride refusing to yield. "You're humiliating yourself, Asher." "No," he replied coolly, straightening to his full height. "I'm simply drawing the line. You're not entitled to my money, my land, or my apologies. That chapter is over." His words, delivered with the precision of a blade, cut deeper than she expected. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, knowing any defense would only worsen the spectacle. For the first time in years, Isabella found herself speechless in front of an audience. The murmurs around them were merciless, snatches of gossip, sympathetic looks toward Asher, and veiled smirks at her expense. Finally, Isabella's composure cracked. Her voice trembled with suppressed rage. "Fine. If that's how you want it, we're done. Don't you ever come crawling back to me when you realize your mistake." Asher's lips curled into a faint, indifferent smile. "Trust me, I won't." She spun on her heel and stormed off, Caleb trailing behind her like a reluctant shadow. Asher watched them leave, then turned back to the bar, swirling the last of the champagne in his glass. The sting of the past had lost its power over him. Tonight, under the glittering chandeliers and curious eyes of high society, he had taken back the narrative point. 2 weeks after the charity auction, Asher King was on the cover of every business magazine. The King heir returns to the game, invests $200 million in new luxury venture. The venture in question was Eclipse, a high-end nightclub and entertainment complex rising in the heart of the city's financial district. The project was the brainchild of Chloe Davis, his childhood friend and one of the few people in his life who had never judged him by his family name. Chloe had always been radiant, sleek auburn hair, a knowing smile that could charm a boardroom, and the poise of a woman who had grown up surrounded by wealth but never let it dull her ambition. Their reunion at a private investors' dinner had been surprisingly effortless. While most women at the event fluttered around Asher like moths to a flame, Chloe had merely raised her glass with a grin. "Still too rich for your own good, King," she'd teased, "and still too smart to waste your time on charity auctions," he'd replied. The next morning, they signed their partnership contract over black coffee and sharp negotiations. Eclipse's concept was simple but brilliant, an exclusive club that blended luxury nightlife with private business lounges for the elite. Within days of its soft launch, Eclipse became the place to be seen, drawing celebrities, politicians, and entrepreneurs alike. For Asher, the nightclub wasn't just a business move. It was a statement, a public declaration that he was no longer the tragic benefactor in someone else's story. He was building his own empire. Meanwhile, across the city, Isabella Vance's world was shrinking by the day. After the confrontation at the auction, the tabloids turned on her, portraying her as a once-spoiled heiress clinging to faded connections. The Vance family's creditors had seized their remaining assets, and she had been forced to vacate the modest apartment she'd rented after leaving Asher's penthouse. She now lived in a dim basement unit beneath a crumbling brownstone. The walls smelled faintly of damp cement, and the single window barely let in any sunlight. The glamorous designer clothes she once flaunted now hung unused in a cheap wardrobe, reminders of a life that felt like another lifetime. Caleb Reed, who had once promised her that they would rebuild together, began to grow distant. His visits became infrequent, his calls shorter and curt. The charm in his voice turned to mild irritation whenever Isabella asked for help. "You have to understand, Isabella," he said one evening over the phone, his tone clipped. "I can't keep lending you money. I have my own career to focus on. You'll figure something out." The call ended before she could respond. Sitting alone in the dimly lit basement, Isabella clutched the phone to her chest, her pride and anger warring with the creeping despair. "I in the King Tower penthouse," the system's voice returned with a persistence that bordered on desperation. "Host, Isabella Vance's financial stability has fallen below survival threshold. She has entered the spiral of her tragic arc. Intervention is critical." Asher barely looked up from the stack of Eclipse's profit reports. "You're starting to sound like a broken record. Deviation from the original storyline has reached 65%. Isabella Vance's despair is destabilizing the narrative. Immediate action is advised to restore balance." "Balance?" Asher let out a dry laugh. "You mean the part where I play knight in shining armor and die for her again? Not happening. Host, ignoring the mission may compromise your existence." "Then compromise it," he snapped, tossing the report onto the coffee table. "I've given this world enough already. I'm not sacrificing my future for someone who couldn't even say thank you." The system went silent, as if recalculating. While Isabella wrestled with unpaid bills and dwindling pride, Asher thrived. Eclipse's first quarter outperformed expectations, drawing the attention of influential investors and making headlines in every major publication. High-profile clients sought his partnership, luxury brands sent him exclusive endorsements. At the grand opening gala of Eclipse, The city's glitterati toasted to the new empire under a canopy of crystal chandeliers and violet neon light. Cameras flashed as Asher stood beside Chloe Davis, both impeccably dressed, looking every inch the power duo. The tabloids churned out headlines overnight: power couple or just business? King and Davis steal the spotlight at Eclipse Gala. Isabella read those headlines the next morning on a cracked phone screen, her fingers trembling. The sight of Asher smiling, radiant, untouchable, beside another woman made her stomach twist with a strange, bitter ache. In the quiet of the penthouse later that night, Asher poured himself a glass of bourbon, savoring the amber liquid as he watched the city lights flicker far below. The system hadn't spoken for hours. He smirked faintly at his own reflection in the window. "Looks like I'm doing just fine without your mission." For the first time since he woke up in this rewritten life, Asher felt something close to peace, not the peace of a savior's sacrifice, but the calm of a man who had finally claimed control of his story. The night sky above the skyline of Manhattan glowed with 1,000 lights, as if the city itself were holding its breath for the drama about to unfold. Inside the glittering top floor of Aurora Tower, Asher King stood at the wide glass window, the reflection of the city shimmering in his dark eyes. Months had passed since the night he threw Isabella and Caleb out of his penthouse, and the world had shifted in ways neither of them could have imagined. Asher had transformed. Once a lovesick fool in the original storyline, he was now a cold, calculating strategist who had clawed his way to becoming one of the city's most influential businessmen. The partnership with Chloe Davis had been nothing short of a masterstroke. Together they launched Velour, an exclusive nightlife empire that turned into a cultural phenomenon. The press called them the Golden Duo, a pair of childhood friends whose shared ambition redefined the meaning of power couples in the corporate world. But success had its price. Isabella, the once envied socialite who had moved through high society like a queen among pawns, now lived in the damp confines of a basement apartment on the outskirts of the city. The fall from grace had been as swift as it was brutal. Her designer gowns were long gone, the last one had been pawned for rent. She worked as a waitress in a rundown diner, where her manicured hands had become calloused from endless hours of labor. Caleb Reed, too, had changed, though not for the better. His relationship with Isabella had soured after her financial downfall. The man who had once sworn he loved her unconditionally grew distant the moment her wealth and influence disappeared. He rarely visited her anymore, busy instead with his own schemes to climb the corporate ladder. Without Asher's resources to lean on, Caleb realized Isabella was no longer the asset he thought she'd be. The system's voice had grown increasingly desperate, often materializing in Asher's mind at the most inconvenient times. "Host, the probability of Isabella's tragic ending is rising exponentially. Please, reconsider. Save her, or the world line will destabilize." But Asher merely smirked each time. "If the world line can't handle me not playing the hero," he replied dryly one night, "then maybe it deserves to collapse." He no longer felt pity for Isabella. The woman who once mocked his sincerity now bore the consequences of her own arrogance. For Asher, this wasn't cruelty, it was justice. Still, there were nights when he couldn't completely suppress a flicker of regret. In another timeline, he had been the man who jumped in front of a car to save her life, who gave her everything without asking for anything in return. That version of himself was long gone, replaced by someone sharper, wiser, perhaps colder. The final confrontation came at an unexpected moment. It was during a charity gala organized by Velour. Chloe, radiant in a sapphire gown, was mingling with investors when Isabella walked in. She had borrowed a faded cocktail dress from a thrift shop, but her posture was as imperious as ever, as if sheer pride could make up for everything she had lost. The guests whispered behind their champagne glasses. Even stripped of her fortune, Isabella still carried herself like the heiress she once was. "Asher," she greeted him stiffly, her voice laced with restrained bitterness. "Asher King," she corrected herself, as if emphasizing the distance between them. I came to talk. He raised an eyebrow, tilting his glass of whiskey slightly. We're talking now. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I want my life back. You owe me that much. If not for you, stop, Asher interrupted, his tone sharp but not loud. I don't owe you anything, Isabella. Not my land, not my forgiveness, and certainly not my sympathy. You chose Caleb. You chose to despise me. Own it. The words struck her harder than she expected. Her composure faltered for just a second before her pride pieced her mask back together. You've changed, she said finally, her voice quieter this time. That's the point, he replied with a faint, humorless smile. We all have to, eventually. Caleb arrived late, his suit impeccable but his eyes betraying discomfort when he saw Isabella standing there. He didn't greet her first, he turned to Asher instead, as though seeking favor from the man he had once considered a rival. The shift in power was undeniable, and Isabella felt it like a blade twisting in her chest. The man she once dismissed as a naive fool now stood untouchable, while she was left fighting shadows of her own past. Asher excused himself to return to Chloe's side, leaving Isabella staring at her own reflection in the mirrored walls of the ballroom, haunted by the realization that she had not only lost the game but had never truly understood the stakes. Later that night, as the gala wound down and the city lights dimmed against the horizon, Asher stood alone on the balcony. The system's voice returned, subdued this time. Host, you've altered the story beyond recognition. Isabella's fate is no longer what it was. Neither is yours. Asher smirked, tossing the last sip of his whiskey into the wind. Good, he murmured. I didn't come here to be a tragedy. Beneath the sharp edges of his words lingered something softer, an unspoken hope that maybe, in this rewritten fate, they had all been given a chance to start over, even if only in different ways. The skyline shimmered back at him, no longer a cage but a promise. The story was no longer about saving someone else, it was about saving himself.